The days that followed were grueling. The crew worked tirelessly to repair the ship, patching up systems that had been pushed well beyond their limits. Supplies were rationed carefully, every resource stretched to ensure their survival. Despite the fatigue, there was a strange sense of unity among them. They had been through something impossible, something that would bond them forever in a way few could understand. As the ship limped toward human-controlled space, the crew had time to reflect on what they had witnessed. They spoke in hushed tones about the creature, the golden ships, and the strange rift that had vanished as suddenly as it appeared. The questions came in waves. Who had sent those pursuers, and why were they so desperate to capture the creature? What was the connection between the golden ships and the glowing alien? And most importantly, what would humanity do if they ever encountered such beings again? The navigator broke the silence one evening as the crew gathered for a rare shared meal. "Do you think they'll believe us?" she asked, her voice uncertain. The pilot shrugged. "Parts of it, maybe. The damage to the ship speaks for itself, and the scans we took should prove we weren't hallucinating. But the rest? That glowing alien pet that saved our skins? The golden ships? The portal? That's harder to swallow." The engineer smirked. "Hard to fake a miracle, though." The medic tilted her head thoughtfully. "Maybe it doesn't matter if they believe us. What matters is that we believed in it. And because we did, we're still here." The captain, who had been quietly listening, set down her mug and leaned forward. "We'll report everything, every detail, no matter how unbelievable it sounds. What happens after that is out of our hands. But I'll tell you this, whatever comes next, we have a responsibility. To protect what we don't understand. To learn from it, not destroy it." The crew nodded, the weight of her words sinking in. They had seen firsthand what fear and misunderstanding could lead to. They had also seen the power of trust, compassion, and sacrifice. As the ship finally approached the outer edges of human-controlled space, the crew was met with a flurry of communications. Their ship's battered state had raised alarms, and a rescue vessel was dispatched to escort them home. The debriefings that followed were intense, every detail of their journey scrutinized. Scientists and officials were skeptical but intrigued, eager to piece together what little evidence remained. Months later, the story of the glowing alien and the mysterious golden ships became the subject of debate, speculation, and fascination across human space. Some dismissed it as an elaborate hoax. Others hailed it as proof that humanity was not alone in the universe. For the crew, the truth was simpler. They had been part of something extraordinary, something that reminded them of their shared humanity and their small but vital place in the cosmos. The captain, now back at headquarters, often found herself looking up at the stars. She wondered if the creature was out there somewhere, safe and free. She wondered if they would ever cross paths again. But most of all, she wondered if humanity would be ready when the next miracle or challenge appeared. For now, it was enough to keep moving forward, one star at a time. And then it entered the portal, disappearing into the swirling energy. The golden ships followed, their forms vanishing into the light. Within moments, the portal collapsed, leaving only the stillness of space behind. The crew stood in silence, the weight of the moment pressing down on them. They had survived, but it wasn't just survival that mattered. It was the knowledge that they had done something right, something meaningful. As they returned to their stations, preparing to leave the now quiet battlefield, the engineer glanced at his console. "Ah, Captain, there's something you should see." On the screen, a single message flickered, written in the same strange symbols they had seen before. But this time, it translated itself, the meaning clear. Thank you. And then it was gone. As the human ship drifted quietly in the vast, empty expanse of space, the crew began the long process of recovery. The lights in the control room were dimmed, the air heavy with exhaustion and reflection. For the first time in hours, or perhaps days, they weren't under immediate threat. But the silence wasn't comforting. It was filled with unspoken questions, lingering doubts, and the faint echo of what they had just witnessed. The captain sat in her chair, her gaze fixed on the endless stars outside. She wasn't sure how to feel. Relief? Pride? Sadness? Perhaps all of them at once. The creature was gone, and so were the golden ships that had appeared like guardians at the moment of greatest need. Yet, a part of her felt empty, as though something vital had been left behind with the collapse of the portal. The medic joined her, sitting on the edge of a console with a faraway look in her eyes. "Do you think it's safe?" she asked softly. The captain turned to her, brow furrowed. "The creature." She nodded. "Wherever it went, with them." "Do you think it's where it's supposed to be?" The captain exhaled slowly. "I don't know, but I think it wanted to go. It made its choice, just like we made ours. All we can do is trust that it's okay." The engineer, still hunched over his console, let out a weary chuckle. "Trust, trust. That's a word, all right. Trusting that glowing space miracle to save our lives. Trusting those golden ships not to blast us out of existence. And now, trusting we'll make it home in one piece. Feels like all we've done is trust." The pilot turned from his station, his face lined with exhaustion but tinged with a smirk. "It's worked so far, kind of. Except for the parts where we nearly got blown to bits." The medic shot him a look, but couldn't help a small smile. "You're welcome, by the way. If it wasn't for the glowing space miracle, none of us would even be here." The pilot raised his hands in mock surrender. "Hey, I'm not complaining. Just saying, next time I'd prefer a miracle with fewer near-death experiences." The tension in the room eased slightly as the crew allowed themselves the smallest reprieve of humor. It wasn't much, but it was enough to remind them they were still alive, still human. They had faced something extraordinary, terrifying, and beautiful, and they had come out the other side. The captain stood, her voice taking on its usual commanding tone. "All right, enough sitting around. Let's get to work. Status report?" The engineer straightened in his seat, glancing at his screens. "Shields are down, but the structural integrity is holding. Engines are functional, though barely. We'll be limping home, but we'll get there." The navigator chimed in from her station, her fingers flying over the controls. "I'm charting a course back to the nearest safe harbor. It's going to take time with the damage we've sustained, but the path looks clear." The captain nodded, satisfied. "Good. Let's focus on repairs first. The last thing we need is to run into trouble out here." As the crew dispersed to their stations, the medic lingered near the captain. "Do you think we'll ever know what really happened?" she asked quietly. The captain looked at her, then out the viewport again. "I don't think we'll ever know everything, but maybe that's the point. Some things aren't meant to be fully understood. Sometimes it's enough to know we did the right thing." The medic nodded slowly, her thoughts far away. "I hope it's enough," she murmured. The creature pulsed, and suddenly, the energy in the cargo bay exploded outward, rippling through the entire ship. The lights flickered, and for a heart-stopping moment, everything went silent. Then the golden ships outside responded in kind, their glowing forms igniting with power. Together, they funneled their energy into the swirling rift, stabilizing it into a massive, shimmering portal. The alien vessels halted their assault, seemingly confused by the sudden shift. But their hesitation didn't last. They turned their weapons toward the rift, clearly intent on destroying it. The captain saw their movements on the screen and made a snap decision. "Pilot, get us between them and the rift," she ordered. The pilot's eyes widened. "That's suicide." "Do it," the captain snapped. "If they close that portal, everything we've fought for is gone." The ship lurched as it veered directly into the line of fire, positioning itself as a shield between the alien vessels and the portal. The crew gripped their stations, their fear overshadowed by a grim determination. They had made their choice, and there was no turning back. In the cargo bay, the creature's glow dimmed slightly, as though it was giving everything it had to sustain the portal. The medic glanced at it, then back at the monitors showing the incoming alien ships. "It's not enough," she whispered, her voice trembling. "They're too strong." And then, as if in response to her words, the unexpected happened. The golden ships moved closer, their energy surging in a way that was almost overwhelming. One of them projected a beam of light directly onto the human ship, enveloping it in a protective aura. The engineer's console lit up, showing systems stabilizing and shields regenerating. The captain's eyes widened. "They're helping us." "Why now?" Before anyone could answer, the medic's voice came through the comms, frantic and filled with realization. "It's the creature. It's not just connected to the portal, it's connected to them. It's been communicating with them this whole time." The creature's glow brightened again, and a new hum filled the ship, low, resonant, and strangely calming. On the view screen, the alien vessels faltered, their movements growing erratic. One by one, their weapon systems powered down, their engines stalling as if they had been caught in a web of invisible energy. But just as hope began to take root, one of the alien ships broke free of the disruption, its weapons charging for a final, devastating blow. The pilot's voice cracked as he shouted, "They're going to fire. We won't survive this." The captain clenched her fists, her mind racing. They had done everything they could, but it wouldn't be enough. She opened her mouth to give one last order, but before she could speak, the creature acted. With a sudden, blinding surge of light, the creature unleashed its full power. The energy rippled outward in a shockwave that passed harmlessly over the human ship and the golden vessels but struck the attacking alien ship with devastating force. The alien ship disintegrated, its remains scattering into the void. The crew stared in stunned silence as the remaining alien vessels retreated, their engines flickering weakly as they disappeared into the vastness of space. The golden ships held their position, their glowing forms pulsing gently as if in acknowledgement. The portal stabilized, its swirling energy a quiet, mesmerizing dance. In the cargo bay, the creature's glow faded to a faint shimmer. Its body seemed smaller now, its movements sluggish. The medic knelt beside it, tears streaming down her face. "You did it," she whispered. "You saved all of us." The captain and the rest of the crew gathered in the cargo bay, their expressions a mix of awe and gratitude. For a moment, no one spoke, the weight of what had just happened sinking in. Finally, the captain broke the silence. "We owe it everything," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "But this isn't over. That portal, it's not just for us. It's for them." She gestured toward the golden ships visible on the monitors. "We have to let it go." The medic nodded, her heart heavy but resolute. She placed a hand on the creature, her voice trembling. "Is that what you want?" she asked softly. "To go through the portal? To be with them?" The creature's faint hum resonated in the room, its pulse steady and calm. It didn't need words to answer. With great care, the crew prepared to release the creature into the portal. The golden ships moved closer, their energy fields intertwining with the rift. As the cargo bay doors opened and the atmosphere shields activated, the creature floated upward, its light brightening one final time. It turned toward the crew, its glow pulsing in a rhythm that felt almost like a heartbeat. A silent goodbye. Captain? I hate to ruin the moment, but I'm picking up a new energy signature from the cargo bay. Whatever that thing is, it's doing something again." The captain bolted for the cargo bay, the medic close behind her. When they arrived, they found the creature glowing more brightly than ever, its trembling replaced by a steady, deliberate pulse. The hum it emitted now wasn't just sound. It was a vibration that seemed to resonate through every surface of the ship. The captain crouched down, her voice calm but firm. "What are you doing? Are you calling for help?" The creature's light flickered, its hum shifting in pitch. The medic knelt beside it, her face filled with wonder. "No, it's not calling for help. It's reaching out. To them." She gestured toward the direction of the golden ships on the display. "It's trying to communicate." Back in the control room, the engineer watched as a new wave of data flooded his systems. The golden ships were responding, their energy signatures syncing with the creature's pulse. But as their connection deepened, the alien vessels that had been pursuing them sprang into action, launching a barrage of weapons fired directly at the golden ships. The first wave of energy blasts collided with an invisible barrier, rippling harmlessly away. But the second wave struck harder, breaking through the shield and slamming into the golden vessels. The human's ship shuddered as the force of the blasts sent shockwaves through the surrounding space. The medic clutched the creature protectively, her voice shaking. "It's not ready. Whatever it's trying to do, it's not strong enough yet." The captain's mind raced. They couldn't just sit there and watch. But how could their small, battered ship make a difference in a battle this massive? She grabbed the intercom, her voice echoing through the ship. "Everyone, listen up. We're not running, and we're not surrendering. If those ships are here to help, we're going to buy them the time they need." The pilot's voice crackled through the speaker, laced with disbelief. "And how exactly are we supposed to do that?" "Be unpredictable," she said. "They're expecting us to run. Let's give them a reason to rethink that." The pilot didn't argue. He pushed the ship into an erratic, spiraling trajectory, weaving dangerously close to the alien vessels. The engineer worked frantically to reroute power to the shields, while the navigator calculated every possible way to keep them moving without crashing. It was reckless, borderline suicidal, but it worked. The pursuing ships hesitated, their focus split between the humans and the golden vessels. In the cargo bay, the creature's light surged, its hum growing louder and more complex. The medic leaned in closer, her voice soft but urgent. "I don't know if you can understand me, but whatever you're trying to do, now's the time. We're with you. Just don't give up." The creature's shimmering body pulsed once, a deliberate, almost reassuring motion. Its hum deepened, resonating through the ship like a heartbeat, and the golden vessels outside responded in kind. Together, their combined energy began to form a brilliant, spiraling vortex, a massive, glowing rift that seemed to tear open the fabric of space itself. But before the rift could stabilize, the pursuing alien ships regrouped. Their weapons locked onto the human vessel, recognizing it as the weak link in the chain. The pilot shouted into the comms, his voice strained. "They're targeting us. Shields won't hold much longer." The captain clenched her fists, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Hold the line. Just a little longer." The rift grew brighter, its edges rippling with power. Inside the cargo bay, the medic felt a wave of warmth wash over her, a sensation that filled her with an unshakable sense of purpose. The creature's hum shifted one final time, its light reaching a blinding crescendo. And then everything changed. The ship trembled violently as the alien vessels unleashed their barrage, their weapons tearing through the weakened shields. Sparks erupted from consoles, and warning sirens screamed through the halls. The crew braced themselves, knowing the next direct hit could be their last. But in the cargo bay, the creature's glow reached an intensity that seemed to push back the chaos itself, filling the room with warmth and light. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, resolute despite the chaos. "Whatever you're doing down there, it's now or never. We can't hold much longer." The medic knelt beside the creature, her hands trembling but steady as she pressed them against its glowing form. "You can do this. I know you can." She didn't know if it understood her words, but she felt a connection, something beyond language, beyond thought. A deep, unshakable certainty. The medic's voice crackled through the intercom. "It's doing something, I don't know what, but it's changing." The crew barely had time to process her words before a brilliant wave of light erupted from the cargo bay, washing over the ship and radiating out into the surrounding space. The pursuing vessels faltered, their movements growing erratic as the light enveloped them. For a brief moment, everything was still, and then the light was gone. The alien vessels regrouped, their weapons powering up again. But something was different. Their movements were slower, almost hesitant, as if the light had disrupted them in some way. In the cargo bay, the creature's glow had dimmed to a faint pulse, its body trembling with exhaustion. The engineer stared at his console, still trying to make sense of the data. It sent out some kind of signal. I think it tried to disable their systems." The pilot's voice was tense. "Well, it didn't work. They're still coming." The captain clenched her fists, her mind racing for a solution. Whatever the creature had done, it had bought them time, but not much. They couldn't outrun the alien vessels forever, and they couldn't fight them head-on. Their only chance was to understand what the creature was trying to tell them before it was too late. The medic's voice came through the intercom again, urgent and full of emotion. "It's weak. Whatever it did, it took a lot out of it. But I think it's trying to tell us something. I just don't know how to listen." The captain closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. "Then we're going to figure it out. All of us. This isn't just about survival anymore. It's about standing for something bigger. If we let them take it, we lose more than just this ship. We lose who we are." The crew nodded, their fear giving way to determination. They didn't have all the answers, but they knew one thing. They weren't going to let the creature face its fate alone. As the alien vessels closed in and the ship's alarms blared louder, they prepared for the fight of their lives, united by a fragile hope that their actions would make a difference. And somewhere, deep in the cargo bay, the creature's pulse quickened, its faint glow rising once more. It wasn't done fighting either. The alien ships loomed closer, their sleek forms cutting through the darkness like predators circling wounded prey. Inside the human vessel, the tension was suffocating. Every crew member felt it, the weight of their decision to protect the creature, the reality that they were vastly outmatched, and the growing uncertainty about what the alien had just done. The captain stood at the center of the control room, her jaw set and her eyes darting between the flickering displays. "Give me options," she demanded. "If we can't fight, we need another way out." "Working on it," the engineer muttered, his hands flying over the controls. "But whatever systems that thing tried to disrupt, they're recovering faster than we are. I can't keep us moving like this much longer. Engines are redlining." The pilot swore under his breath, gripping the controls tightly. "If we're not gonna fight or run, then what's left? Surrender. Hand it over and hope they don't fry us anyway." The medic burst into the room, her face pale but her voice steady. "No. Surrender isn't an option. That creature, whatever it is, it's trying to save us. But it's also trying to stop them. I think it's more important than we realize." The captain turned to her, her brow furrowed. "Explain." "It's not just intelligent. It's connected to something bigger," the medic said, her words tumbling out in a rush. "When I touched it, I felt things. Fragments of something huge, like it's tied to the fabric of space itself. I know that sounds insane, but I think that's why they want it back. They're afraid of what it can do." Before the captain could respond, a blaring alarm cut through the room. The navigator's hands shook as she pointed at the screen. Another ship just appeared. "No, wait. 2 more. There, not like the others." The display filled with the images of 2 massive vessels, each one radiating a soft, golden light that contrasted sharply with the cold, predatory design of their pursuers. These new ships were elegant, almost organic in appearance, with flowing curves that seemed to pulse gently like living things. The alien vessels, pursuing them, stopped abruptly, their formations breaking apart as if in sudden confusion. The captain leaned forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "What's happening?" The medic stared at the screen, her heart pounding. I think those are its allies." The golden ships didn't move to attack, nor did they attempt to communicate. Instead, they positioned themselves between the humans and the pursuing aliens, their presence a silent warning. For a moment, the tension in the control room eased until the engineer noticed something on his console. As her fingers brushed against its translucent skin, a jolt of sensation shot through her images, emotions, and fragments of meaning flashing in her mind. She gasped, pulling her hand back, but the feeling lingered. It wasn't painful, but it was overwhelming, like trying to grasp an entire universe in a single moment. She stumbled out of the cargo bay and into the control room, her face pale. "It's not just intelligent," she said, her voice trembling. "It's aware. It knows what's happening." The crew stared at her, unsure how to respond. The captain stepped closer. "What did it tell you?" The medic shook her head. "Not in words. It was more like feelings. It's scared, but not just for itself. It's scared for us." Before anyone could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship. The alien vessels had moved closer, their weapons locking onto the human's craft. The navigator's voice broke through the chaos, panic evident. "They're charging weapons." The captain barked orders, sending the crew scrambling to their stations. The pilot fired up the engines, pushing the ship into evasive maneuvers as the first shots streaked past them, lighting up the darkness of space. The ship shook violently, the strain of their speed pushing it to its limits. In the chaos, the medic returned to the cargo bay, her mind racing. She knelt beside the creature again, her fear giving way to desperation. "If you can hear me, if you understand, please, we need help. We're trying to protect you, But we can't do it alone. The creature's glow intensified, its hum rising to a sharp, crystalline tone that resonated through the ship. In the control room, the engineer's console lit up with a cascade of data, unreadable symbols and patterns flooding the screen. "What is this?" he shouted, frantically trying to decode the information. "It's coming from the cargo bay." The captain's eyes widened. "Is it trying to communicate with the ship?" "It's not just inconvenient," the pilot snapped. "It's dangerous. You think whoever's following us is going to stop if we just say sorry, we didn't know?" "They might not stop," the engineer admitted, "but I'd rather stand for something than run scared." Meanwhile, the captain was in her quarters, poring over every bit of information they had gathered about the creature. There wasn't much, just fragments of data collected by their sensors and observations from the crew. But one thing stood out. The creature's biology didn't match any known species. It was entirely unique. And if that was true, the implications were staggering. She leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling. What were they supposed to do? Protecting the creature felt like the right thing, but at what cost? The crew's safety had to come first, didn't it? The hours ticked by, each one bringing the pursuing ships closer. Tension aboard the vessel reached a breaking point as the crew debated their options. Some argued for keeping the creature hidden and preparing to defend themselves if necessary. Others pushed for a compromise, attempting to negotiate with whoever was coming. As the deadline approached, the creature's behavior grew more erratic. It began emitting a soft, melodic hum that resonated through the cargo bay, sending shivers down the spines of anyone who heard it. The medic and the engineer spent hours trying to interpret what it was doing, but they could only guess. And then, just as the pursuing ships came within range, the hum stopped. The creature stood motionless, its shimmering light now glowing brighter than ever. The crew gathered in the control room, watching anxiously as their sensors picked up the unmistakable signatures of 3 alien vessels, each one larger and more advanced than their own. "They're hailing us," the navigator said, her voice barely above a whisper. The captain took a deep breath, her heart pounding. "Put it on screen." The display flickered to life, revealing an alien figure with cold, calculating eyes. Its voice was sharp and emotionless, yet somehow commanding. "You have something that does not belong to you," it said. The captain squared her shoulders, trying to appear calm despite the fear coursing through her. "We found it, abandoned. We mean no harm." The alien tilted its head slightly, as if amused by her response. "You do not understand. That creature is not yours to save. Return it to us, or face the consequences." The captain hesitated, glancing at her crew. This was the moment of truth. What would they choose? The captain's mind raced, weighing the alien's ultimatum against the fragile trust her crew had built with the creature. The shimmering alien in their cargo bay had been left to die, discarded like trash. Yet here its former masters were, demanding its return with cold authority. Her gut told her that handing it over would seal its fate, and maybe theirs too. But refusing? That could escalate the situation beyond anything they could handle. She stepped forward, her voice steady but firm. "Before we make any decisions, I need answers. Why was it abandoned? Why come for it now?" The alien on the screen tilted its head again, the faintest hint of impatience breaking through its calculated calm. "That information is irrelevant. Return the creature, or your ship will be destroyed." The crew's eyes darted to the captain, their fear palpable. She felt their unease like a weight pressing down on her chest. But she held her ground. "It's not irrelevant, Tass. We risked our lives to save it. If you want it back, you need to tell us why." The alien's gaze sharpened, its silence heavy. For a moment, it seemed like the connection might cut out, but then it spoke again, its tone colder than before. "It is a failed experiment. Its purpose was incomplete. You do not understand what you have brought aboard." As the transmission ended abruptly, the control room erupted in hushed arguments. The medic was the first to speak. "Failed experiment? What does that even mean?" "They're lying. There's no way they care about it if they abandoned it." "Maybe it's not about care," the pilot muttered. "Maybe it's about control. What if it knows something they don't want getting out?" The engineer frowned. "Or what if it's not failed at all? What if it's more important than they're letting on?" The captain raised a hand, silencing the room. "Enough. We don't have time for guesses. If we're going to survive this, we need to figure out what they're hiding, and fast." In the cargo bay, the creature's hum had returned, but it was different now, deeper, resonating through the ship like a heartbeat. The medic knelt beside it, watching as its shimmering light shifted through an array of colors, each one more vibrant than the last. She reached out slowly, her hand hovering just above its surface. She had no idea why, but she felt compelled to try to connect with it. The ship drifted through the void of space, its crew working tirelessly to figure out what they had gotten themselves into. They had all agreed to bring the creature aboard, but now that it was here, unease hung in the air. The shimmering alien, fragile, yet somehow otherworldly in its presence, had been given a small corner in the cargo bay to recover. Its makeshift habitat was surrounded by sensors, not just to monitor its condition, but to keep an eye out for anything unexpected. The crew, however, couldn't shake the feeling that unexpected was an understatement. The medic spent the most time with it, carefully tending to the wounds and malnutrition it had suffered on that desolate planet. Every so often, the creature would look up at her with those deep, knowing eyes, and she swore she could feel something familiar. It wasn't quite communication, not in the way humans understood, but there was intent behind its gaze. She felt it wasn't just looking at her, it was learning her. Others on the crew were more skeptical. The pilot, a seasoned traveler who had seen his share of strange things in the galaxy, wasn't convinced. He watched from a distance, arms crossed, shaking his head whenever the medic spoke about how the creature seemed to respond to kindness. To him, it was just a liability. They had no idea where it came from or why it had been abandoned. For all they knew, it was dangerous. And now they were being tracked. The signals started faintly at first, barely noticeable blips on their scanners, but soon they became impossible to ignore. The crew gathered in the control room, tension thick in the air as the navigator brought up a map of their trajectory. The blips weren't random. They were in pursuit. It could be a coincidence, one crew member suggested, though their voice wavered. "No," the pilot said firmly. "That's not a coincidence. Someone's following us." The captain, a quiet but decisive leader, leaned over the console, eyes narrowing at the screen. "And they're closing in." The crew's unease turned into outright fear when the medic, who had been monitoring the creature in the cargo bay, burst into the room. "It knows," she said, breathless. "I swear, it knows we're being followed." "What are you talking about?" the pilot asked, his tone sharp. "It's been acting restless," she said, struggling to find the words. "Like it can sense something's coming. Its colors are changing rapidly. It's trying to tell us something." The captain rubbed her temples, torn between trusting her crew and the cold logic of the situation. "Even if it is trying to communicate, what are we supposed to do? We don't know who's out there. and we don't know what they want." "They want it," the medic said softly. "Why else would they be following us now? They must have realized we have it." The room fell silent as the weight of her words sank in. They had taken in a creature they didn't understand, and now it seemed they had drawn the attention of whoever or whatever had left it behind. The engineer, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. "We can't just hand it over." The pilot scoffed. "And why not? This isn't our fight. If giving it back means saving our necks, I say we do it." "It's not about us," the engineer shot back. "Think about what that thing's been through. They left it to die. Do you really think they want it back out of kindness?" "That's enough," the captain interrupted, her voice steady but firm. "We're not making any decisions until we know what we're dealing with. Navigator, how long until the closest signal reaches us?" "At their current speed, about 12 hours. Then we have 12 hours to figure out who's coming and why." With that, the meeting ended, and the crew dispersed, each person grappling with their own thoughts about the situation. The medic returned to the cargo bay, where the creature had retreated into a corner of its habitat. Its shimmering light had dimmed to a faint glow, and it was trembling slightly, as if it could feel the tension aboard the ship. "It's okay," she whispered, crouching near the edge of the enclosure. "We won't let anything happen to you." The creature's trembling slowed, and its eyes locked onto hers again. For a moment, she felt an overwhelming sense of connection, like it was trying to share its thoughts with her. She blinked, startled, and the moment passed. But she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this creature than anyone realized. In another part of the ship, the pilot and engineer were locked in a heated argument. The pilot insisted that the only logical move was to cut their losses and jettison the creature before it got them all killed. The engineer, however, refused to back down. "We're better than that," he said, his voice steady despite the pilot's anger. "We don't just throw something away because it's inconvenient." In the far reaches of the galaxy, where stars shone like scattered diamonds against a sea of black, a lone vessel drifted silently in orbit around a forgotten world. It was here, on the barren, rocky surface below, that the alien pet waited, a creature left behind by a civilization that had long since abandoned this planet. To most, it was just a strange, unimportant animal, something to discard when it no longer served a purpose. To humans, however, it would become something much more. The creature, barely clinging to life, was unlike anything anyone on Earth had ever seen. Its body shimmered faintly, like moonlight reflected on water, and its eyes held an unsettling depth, as if it could pierce straight into your soul. It was intelligent, that much was clear, but in ways no one fully understood. Its former masters, a species known for their cold efficiency, had left it here to fend for itself, stripped of any resources, companionship, or chance of survival. They considered it expendable, a mere experiment gone wrong. For them, the creature's worth had ended the moment it failed to meet their expectations. And yet, despite its apparent fragility, the creature refused to succumb. Days turned into weeks, then months, and it survived by scavenging scraps from the sparse vegetation and the occasional small prey that wandered too close. But isolation was a heavy burden. Its once bright shimmer dulled, and the life in its eyes began to fade. If help didn't come soon, the galaxy would lose something unique, something extraordinary though few would ever know or care. That's when the humans arrived. The spacecraft that touched down wasn't sleek or imposing like the alien vessels of old. It was practical, slightly battered and undeniably human. Its crew had stumbled upon the planet entirely by accident, a navigational error that had diverted them from their planned course. What they found when they landed wasn't the advanced civilization they'd hoped to discover, but a desolate wasteland. At first glance, there was no reason to stay. But humans have a peculiar way of noticing things others overlook. It was a young engineer who spotted the faint tracks in the dust, tiny, irregular patterns that didn't match any known life form in their database. Intrigued, the crew decided to investigate. They followed the trail for miles, through jagged canyons and over windswept ridges, until they reached a sheltered cave. Inside, huddled in the shadows, was the creature. It was so still they thought it might already be dead, but then it opened its eyes. For a moment, they met the gaze of something ancient, something that seemed to carry the weight of countless stories and sorrows. The first reaction among the crew was fear. After all, they had no idea what it was or what it was capable of. Some argued they should leave it alone. It wasn't their problem. But one voice, calm and firm, broke through the debate. It was the ship's medic, who reminded them of a simple truth. No living being deserved to die alone and forgotten. The decision wasn't unanimous, but it was final. They would bring the creature aboard. What followed was a journey unlike any they had ever imagined. The creature, though weak, began to show signs of remarkable intelligence. It communicated in ways that were subtle but unmistakable, a shift in color here, a faint hum there. It seemed to understand them, even if it couldn't speak. And as the days passed, the crew grew attached to it. They named it, though the name was simple, a placeholder until they could learn its true one. But their actions didn't go unnoticed. Somewhere in the vastness of space, the former masters of the creature became aware of the humans' interference. They were not pleased. This was not just about a discarded pet. It was about control, about erasing any evidence of their failure. The humans had unknowingly stepped into something much bigger than themselves. As the ship's sensors began to pick up unfamiliar signals, the crew realized they were being hunted. They didn't know who was coming or why, but one thing was certain: they wouldn't give up the creature without a fight. And so, the stage was set. A small group of humans, armed with nothing but their ingenuity and determination, against an advanced alien species determined to reclaim what they had thrown away. The odds were impossible, the stakes unimaginably high, but that's the thing about humans: they have a way of defying expectations. Would they find a way to protect their new companion? Or had they brought it aboard only to seal its fate and their own? Stay tuned, because this story is just getting started.